entertained? Are you not entertained?
What up, anime community? This is Almighty Geek back today with my third part video on the One Piece live action adaptation. And before we get into this discussion, like always, like, comment, and subscribe. In part 1, I talked about some of the things I found and I liked about the One Piece live action series. In part 2, I talked about the bad and hopefully some of the things that they can improve on. And in this video, we're going to talk about support and how it ultimately affected the series in a positive way. Overwhelming support from a fan base can be one of the most important things you can ask for as a creator. And by God, does Oda have an amazing supporting fan base. I feel like one of the main key components for this One Piece live action adaptation being so successful is the fact that the fans wouldn't accept anything else regardless of how bad it would have been or looked. I feel as if the One Piece fans still would have been like, oh yo, this is the greatest thing ever, basically lying through their teeth. And to be honest, just to be a little bit honest, guys, they kind of did, just a little. Again, it's not a 10 out of 10 like some One Piece fans would like you to believe. I just feel that the fan base is so big that the positive far outweighs the negative, guys. Hence why you've been seeing people say that maybe Cowboy Bebop should get a second season. Now, literally, hear me out, guys, hear me out. One of the main things I took away from this One Piece live action series, to be honest, is if the fans wanted it to be successful regardless of it being bad or not, that's what will happen. It's going to be successful. Because in my opinion, there's not too big of a difference between the Cowboy Bebop live action adaptation and this one. Like, seriously. I just feel like in the case of both series, one was okay and forgiving when it came to the drastic changes that Netflix made, and the other wasn't, meaning the Cowboy Bebop fan base, guys. Are we forgetting literally all the memes and jokes for days that the fans had to say about the Cowboy Bebop live action when it first came out? But get this, the One Piece fandom wasn't having any of that. The one thing that I have to mention in this video, right guys, just to kind of segue for a little bit, one of my coworkers once said to me that the bigger fan base wins every time. Looking back on that now, I gave him a little bit of pushback, literally arguing with him. But now, hindsight is 2020, he was kind of right. Let me give you a couple of examples of what I'm trying to say, or what I'm trying to get across, guys. When you compare Dragon Ball Z to One Piece, it's likely going to always win in terms of sheer numbers that the fan base actually has, whether you're talking about arguments over fights, whether you're trying to debate over what has a better story or anything, it's most likely going to win just because how big the sheer fan base is. If you're talking about One Piece going up against Naruto, it's most likely going to do the same just off the sheer numbers that the fan base has. If you talk about Naruto versus Bleach, again, the same thing will happen. If you talk about Bleach versus any of the new shonen series that's been coming out lately, the same thing is going to happen, etc, 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 guys. It's the fan base that decides if something is good or bad. And when it comes to most of the other live action adaptations, the reason I feel like they did so poorly, in my opinion, was because, hey, the fan base decided that they weren't going to accept anything different. They did not care when it came to something that they held like so close to their hearts. They thought it was bad, so it was bad. All the changes that were made, they just couldn't handle it. But you have the One Piece community who are like, we're okay with the changes. We were expecting it to be different from its counterpart. Again, they got the notice that Oda said, hey, I'm going to be working with Netflix on this project. What more could they ask for? Don't get me wrong, the One Piece live action adaptation was good, but if you're telling me like, hey yo, is this the best live action adaptation they made for a manga / anime series? No, in my opinion, that goes to Rurouni Kenshin. But again, we all have different opinions. Yours might be different from mine, and that's okay. But if you get the gist of what I'm trying to say, you know I'm literally just calling out the obvious, guys. We can't get mad that this series is so successful just because the actual community of One Piece has no issue with it. And every other salty fanbase, and yes, I am going to say salty fanbase because you had a chance for your live action adaptation to be successful. Whether it was Bleach, Whether it was Full Metal Alchemist, whether it was Gintama, etc., etc. I was gonna say Dragon Ball Z Evolution, but we know damn well there was no saving that movie. That one is the exception. It definitely deserves all the hate it gets. So let's throw that in the trash. But when it comes to these other live action adaptations, they could have been great. All it took was their own fan base to not be so toxic and see what could have been built upon. The acceptance of knowing it was different, but it can still be great if you give it a chance to grow. But that's not the case. You literally had Bleach fans calling out the Bleach live action adaptation. Hey, it was bad, it was horrible. You had Full Metal Alchemist fans literally calling out Full Metal Alchemist live action adaptation. Same thing, it was horrible, it was bad, oh my god. We decide if something is good or bad. That is true. But what we can't control is the growing narrative that the fans put out there about their own series. You get what I'm trying to say? One Piece fans made sure that they controlled the narrative, that they didn't care if any other person who wasn't part of the fan base, who wasn't a fan of One Piece, who didn't like the series, it didn't matter to them. Which I have to give them props for. Again, I wish every other fan base could have been the same way. But we see that's not the truth. And being honest with you guys, it wouldn't surprise me if when the Yu Yu Hakusho live action adaptation comes out on Netflix, if that does well too. Because to be truly honest with you guys, the Yu Yu Hakusho community, which I am a proud member to be a part of, is just like the One Piece community. We barely talk about anything bad when it comes to Yu Yu Hakusho. We try not to compare its greatness to any other animes or mangas. We try not to diminish them. We say nothing but positive things about our own series. So hopefully when it does drop and when it does come out, this will just be another example of a fan base deciding if they're going to let any outsider determine if their series is good or bad, especially if they weren't there from the beginning, guys. That's my take on that. Again, One Piece fandom, I'm gonna give you guys kudos. You said you loved it and you loved it. You don't give a damn if anybody else hates it. And I appreciate you guys for that, and I respect you guys for that. So that's really what really the main thing I wanted to get across in this third part series was just, again, kudos to the One Piece fandom. A lot of other fandoms can be the same way and just try to be caring and supportive, but we try not to. We try to just bash and be as toxic as we can, and it just needs to stop. Okay, guys? Hopefully we learn our lesson from this live action adaptation. And going forward, when it comes to the Naruto getting approved and when it comes to other series getting approved, we do the same thing. We give them a chance to actually grow and see where it can go from there. Again, remember, it's live action. It's not going to be the same as the manga. It's not going to be the same as the anime, but it can be different and it can be great in its own way. And if you give it a chance to be, it most likely will. But if you off bat try to be toxic and unsupportive, and then you're 4 or 5 years down the line, you're wondering why everybody is bashing on your series and why has it become a new thing to just bash on it, that's because your community you guys let it become that way. You let it become toxic to the point where now anybody else that sees your community just sees it as toxic. Anybody else that sees the actual show just sees it as bad, because that's the narrative that you put out there. That's all I got to say, guys. As always, this has been your boy Almighty Geek. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'm out of here, y'all. Peace, love, and deuces.